As most of you know, at heart, I'm a nerdy teacher who loves to read. And I can't wait to interview our next guest because she is not only a famous actress and activist, she's an author. And I can't wait for you to learn about her second book. I loved her first book, but I'm obsessed with her second, as will you. And what I was so excited preparing for this interview with the lovely actor, actress, and activist, now author extraordinaire, is the ability to bring together other folks who love to read to ask questions. So the net was pretty wide. I reached out to educators, I reached out to graduate students, I reached out to students. The one thing they all share in common is they could be in your fan club, Miss April Hernandez. So without further ado, I want to dive in because I got a stack of questions. And the caveat for every single one of these questions was they would get a copy of your brand new book. And I'm splurging for the hardback copy. Yes, the hardback copy that will go on their dresser, on their bookshelves, in their classroom. And my hope is that it will become a teaching tool, that teachers will read it and then want to put it in their curriculum, that parents will read it and they'll want to share it with their kids. And I'm hoping for all of you voracious fans, you'll just know more insight about this amazing woman who constantly seems to be a meme and trending. So we want this book to become a major bestseller. That is my heartfelt goal throughout this hour. And for all of you that are watching at home, please continue to send us questions. Please rush out and get this book or go online and purchase it and know what all the buzz is about. So without further ado, I will ask my own question before we dive in to the stash of questions I've gotten internationally is, what does it feel like to be a best-selling author? What does that feel like for you to know that your words are going to be in libraries and classrooms and homes?
Let me let that sink in for a bit. I'm just inspired by you, obviously, by the Freedom Writers. You know who I really get inspired by? Anne Frank.
Mm.
Her ability to write so long ago, and yet her words still have so much impact. That's what I dream about. I dream about, and I don't even know if I've been able to dream that far. If my words will go and reach the world, that's what I hope for. Um, I'm just so excited. I think this is the best time for this kind of book, for especially for this kind of title, embracing one another, embracing yourself. So I'm excited, I'm elated, I'm terrified because I let it all hang, Mrs. G. I let it all hang. I let it all hang. But I know that it comes from a place of transparency.
And I think some of us are traumatized about the former administration. And so I think people need what you're giving, what you're serving, transparency,
Mhm.
honesty, and in the embracing of yourself, you're embracing empathy, which we are craving right now. So I'm just so thrilled to dive into our first question.
Okay.
This first question is from Nicole. She is a teacher and she works in Moreno Valley School District here in California. She said, April, my favorite character is Ava from the Freedom Rider film. And I wanted to know if you ever felt like that character, Ava, during your lifetime. Ava was able to play the character. I'm sorry, April was able to play the character so convincingly that I wondered how much she could understand Ava's thought process, her anger, and her frustration. So, going to the Freedom Writers film,
Right.
tell us about that process.
Interesting enough, the process was a bit foreign to me, in the sense of I've never experienced racism. Growing up in New York City, we are a melting pot. And so most of my life I lived in the Bronx, didn't really travel outside of that other than Manhattan or Brooklyn to Coney Island. And you see people of color all of the time. So it was foreign to me in the sense of hating someone just based on their color. And when I was sitting with Maria and I was asking her like, "Did you really say you hate white people?" And she said, "Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I hated white people and I hated Miss Gruwell and I was gonna give her hell." You know how Maria has her finger. And I was like, okay. So once I took that in, I had to really digest it and understand it, but really pay respect and honor to it. Because unfortunately, it really feels like nothing has changed, but things have changed when it comes to dealing with racism. And I think that was the toughest thing. I think how I identified with her was just being a Latina, right?
Mm.
Fighting for your sense of belonging to the world, even though sometimes you're felt like you're made to feel as if you don't fit in. And what I realized is, Miss G, I don't fit in, and nor do I care to. But I think that was the gem. That was the thing that I had to really nurture, was identifying and understanding hating someone just because of their race.
Amazing.
And not making it fake, not being fake about it, like I hate white people, like I think that's why it still resonates. And when people watch it, it's like it takes your breath, because that's very bold to say on camera.
Well, during the social unrest this year and people protesting, your face, your lines became a meme. I think that was
Mhm.
amazing. You were trending.
I was trending. That's totally
I love
trending.
that. I love that. Which is ironic. We have several questions about Maria because I think it really resonated with people who know your story and also know the film. So here is another question, which means another hardback copy of Embracing Me.
Oh wait, let me put it up.
Oh, there we go. There we go. You're going to be your own Vanna White. I love
Oh,
that.
oh my gosh,
This
love that
is
fight.
a brilliant educator. She is a former teacher and now a graduate student trying to make the world better. And she lives in England. She said, April, how did you undertake really getting into the role of Maria in the film? Because she loves the film and she wants to know kind of your process. And I love how you touched on that you didn't go through everything that Maria went through, but as a
Right.
Latina, what was your process of knowing I can do justice to this character?
One of the one of the ways I approached the role was, I was not so nice on set purposely. I isolated myself purposely because she did.
Mm.
Because she didn't trust anyone. And I knew sort of that I was, in a sense, carrying this torch. I don't want to say carrying the film because I feel like this was a collaborative effort and there were so many people who were carrying the film. But as far as Ava's mission, it was to isolate and remain in power. So I sort of did that. And I used to feel bad because some of the actors really didn't know when I was being April and when I was being Ava. And I was like, oh, that's good then. If they can't tell the difference. And there was only a select few who I would just connect with and like laugh. But I tried not to laugh a lot, especially when I knew we were going to begin filming the famous classroom scene. Richard LaGrevenez, who directed the film, he was fantastic at creating an environment that felt tense. It was tense on those 3 days, and so it wasn't that hard. But yeah, as an actor, you do whatever you need to do to get to that place. And when you are going to say those words, "I hate white people," that doesn't come very lightly.
But I like when you embodied Maria,
Mhm.
the natural tears and frustration and just saying so much by not saying anything. I mean, that's true acting.
Right,
And I think that's why the first few questions really are about that, because what you have to realize is these educators use this film in their class
right.
as a teaching tool. So you are like Shakespeare. You are teaching kids how to have really courageous conversations about racism. And so I applaud you that.
Thank you. Thank
This
you.
next question, I love this question because I love this individual so much. His name is Dr. Tom Reifer, but we in Freedom Writer World named him Tom Pock because he knows every lyric of Tupac. And as a professor at the University of San Diego, he uses both the Freedom Writers and Tupac to teach social justice. So he said, Dear April, I love you and Maria and identified with both of you so much in the Freedom Writers film. Despite differences in color, experiences, and background, though some have called Maria my doppelganger.
Hmm.
Would you talk about meeting Maria and if you have, and if and how you feel connected with her story may have helped tell your own story and any of the similarities and or differences that you feel are meaningful to you? And as a caveat, before you answer, he says, thank you so much for everything, April, but most of all for representing the hood, where for all of its challenges, Tupac found love.
Hey, I'm gonna represent the BX because that's where I'm from, the Bronx. Okay, so if you were to see Maria and I together, you would be like, oh, I get it.
Of course.
Right? Although I'm Puerto Rican, she's Mexican. We're both short. We're both loud and feisty. We both aren't afraid to say how we feel. And some people sometimes take that as, like, oh, aggressive. But I really truly think that that's a powerful thing because in our, in Latinx community, a lot of us aren't given the opportunity to speak up. We really don't understand the power of our voices. For some of us, I'd rather be, I'd rather not be seen. I'd rather not be heard. But when Miss Maria walked in, you are going to hear her and see her. So when we were together, I felt, and she loves hoop earrings. That was just the instant connection. And there's like a love language that is unspoken. It's like we get each other's struggle, let alone we're just both women on a mission, right? We want to have an impact in this world. And I find that sometimes it's not easy for people to be around women who are that focused. And that's, I feel like our connection was like, we became friends. It was more than just, oh, I'm an actor, did my job. Great. I played someone and that was all. I mean, you guys came to my wedding. And so the dynamic was very special and very dear to my heart. I mean, her story changed my life. When I think of sort of Jennifer Lopez playing Selena, you can't see Jennifer Lopez's career without her playing Selena. So that's the impact. That's how I felt, and that's how I feel about Maria to this day.
There's a beautiful video when we were on quarantine of these two little boys who finally had freedom and they just run and
Oh,
embrace. Oh, it makes me weep.
oh my gosh.
I feel like that when I'm with the two of you. I feel like a parent watching two best friends on a play date. And I get teary-eyed. I mean, watching you at your wedding and then
Mhm.
seeing the celebration of the dance and the love. And so I see that little video of the hug and the embrace, and I think of you and Maria.
Yeah, and listen, when we were on tour, right? When we were on tour going around, I got to witness, other than you, but someone who resembled me, get up and speak with such confidence and such, just like this grandiose feel of a personality in this 5 foot little body. And I thought, wow, she's a rock star.
Hello, Rockstar.
No,
For yeah,
right. But like at that moment, I didn't, I was still just acting. I didn't understand really like, oh, you can speak and people listen, right? Because I was just a performer. And I remember Maria looked at me and she said, one day your voice is going to impact the world. Just know that. I will never forget when she said that to me, ever, ever.
having been in the audience and being riveted. I mean, I not only was I personally riveted, but I looked around at everyone else and they were starstruck. Because when you do speak, and my hope is that for educators who are watching, that they have you zoom into their classrooms or stand in their auditoriums, or when the world is normal yet again, to have you come and fill an auditorium. It's exquisite. But what you can do to an audience is you make them laugh, you make them cry, you make them question, and they take away wanting to do more. So that's my hope, is that for people who are watching and inspired, that they say, let's zoom her in or invite her in.
Right.
So speaking of being invited in, here is a fellow New York teacher, Megan Abruzzo. And Megan is a New York teacher, and she works with students who are often labels, students who uh, often have the term special education, or learning social emotional skills that are not in a traditional high school. So I love that she uses this film. She loves your character, and she wanted to know, what were the lessons that you actually took away once Freedom Writers were done filming and then it was out in the world? Like, what were your takeaways that became a part of your life?
Hmm. The number one takeaway I would have to say, definitely, healing happens in community. Healing really happens in a community that is set, where you feel safe, where you feel connected, where you feel supported. And when you watch the film, that is what you see. That's what you see, just for these 2 hours, but you had it for so much longer. But as a takeaway for me, it's like, wow, healing happens in community. Stories really do help one another. When you hear someone who's been, you know, beat up, broken down, and they still find a way to succeed, you want to say, if they can do it, wow, maybe there's something I can take away and add it to my life. And constantly seeing that, we saw that in the part of Miyapki's, right? That we're all called to be a light. And so I love that. I think those three things right there, being a light in the world, especially now where I finally feel like we're going to see the light a little bit more now more than ever.
And I think what's so amazing with all of these questions, these are teachers who are going to get your book, teachers are going to read your book, and then you are their meet moment. You are the light that keeps getting brighter and brighter. I mean, that's exciting. I don't think it's sunk in for you yet.
I
It's
don't
going
know.
to sink in at some point, but I want to just sink in
Right.
that the way that you speak of others, the Marias and the Meeps and the Anne Franks, you're now on that shelf. You still have that. I know, think about that. You're part of that legacy. And so,
Wow.
speaking of legacies, this is an amazing teacher named Karen Gibson in Maryland. And what Karen Gibson does is she works with young people where English may not be their first language, and she does so with a tenderness and talent that allows them to embrace their first language at home, learn English, and not prioritize one over the other. So I love that the dignity she gives to students who don't speak English when they arrive in her classroom. But speaking of legacy, Karen's question for you was, if you could imagine a role that
Mm.
would be your acting legacy. You talked about J-Lo and Selena. What would that legacy be? It could be Freedom Writers, but is there a role that you haven't been cast in yet, or something that is going to be imprinted in all of our minds in the future? What would your ideal acting legacy be?
Wow.
It's a good question, huh?
Gosh, that's deep. I mean, I would love to have a legacy like a Meryl Streep, where she just completely envelops herself. I feel like I want to make a movie that when you watch it, it makes you question yourself. It makes you, wait, I did. That was Freedom Writers. I think it's one of those. I've always saw myself playing like a revolutionist. Obviously, it's just, fighting for
Like a female Che Guevara.
right. Yes, I see that. I've always seen myself playing a coach. There's always something good about a good sports movie, and we've never seen a woman coach in a film. Think about it. All the films that we see, they're all men. And I go, there's so many women who are coaches, and there's something about having a mentor or a coach, move you in your life. And I see myself in romantic comedies. I started doing comedy, but definitely like a revolutionist.
Well, now that you're a best-selling author, maybe you have to write the screenplay. Maybe maybe that role hasn't been written because you haven't written it yet. So
This
many great roles, people write themselves into it. So maybe that's on the horizon for you now that you've got your writing chops down to say, I've done the novels and the memoirs. Now I've got to do a screenplay. So let's put that
yeah.
in the universe.
We'll put that in the universe. Of course. I mean, people have been asking me like, "Oh, do you want to write this?" And I go, I do. I just need a break because
You've
writing
written hard.
everything out of me. Like, when do you start writing your next book after you've written a book? How do you
Well, I hid under the table sucking my thumb in fetal position. So when that was done, because as you know, it's terrifying. It's a terrifying process.
it is a
And
tip.
embracing me, you go there. You are exposed, you're vulnerable. And so I don't know if that ever goes away, but it
Right.
also for screenwriters, Richard LaGravenese, who wrote Freedom Writers and directed it, also had those moments of feeling exposed and transparent. So I think for all the people that are watching today who are writing, whether it's an assignment for a class or writing because they're a teacher or writing because it's coming from within, it's a difficult, daunting task, but you did it. Um, it's a fait accompli. It's out in the world.
I know, Misty, someone asked me, "Oh my gosh, while you were writing, was it liberating?" And I was like, "No, it's deathly." I feel so lonely because it is at one point it becomes a very, you're alone with your thoughts, you're alone with your words. And so liberating sometimes, lonely most of the time.
And I'm sure your mother and your
Right.
wife that there was a lot of all-nighters, and I loved watching you through this process and us communicating and having just a small part to write the forward, knowing that while I was writing the forward, you were in that painstaking part of literally psychoanalyzing every word and looking for this comma and this period. And I love that you went through that because
Right.
that is part of the shtick of saying every single word in this book came from me. I'm so proud of you for every comma, for every period, for every word. It's yours. No ghostwriter. I mean, this is you.
No, no ghostwriter. Absolutely not. This is just me having, a team that was diligent in saying, no, what does that mean? What do you really want to say? Forcing you to just say it without the fluff, right? But also because I'm an artist, I'm like, how do I take them on this journey, right? If you've never been to the Bronx and you live in England, if you read this, do you get a better sense? Can you place yourself in these little pockets of New York City that I've hopefully described in a way that you can say, oh, I see it.
I love that.
I think when you really care about the words that you're writing, you just, there is like this angst of saying, will they get it?
Well, not only do they get it, this is kind of exciting. When you think of the Harry Potter series, there's a lot of authors who find their voice and they write, and often. So this particular question is from a teacher who's already read the first book and is ready to get a copy of your second book. So this is Crystal Russell, a dear Freedom Writer teacher in Ohio. And she did read your first book, Your Voice, Your Choice. So she asked April, did your first book, Your Voice, Your Choice, contribute to the evolution of embracing me? And if so, how have you embraced any and all traumatic childhood experiences and utilized those skills to empower yourself to write a new story, not only for yourself, but get this, for generations to come?
Oh my goodness. That is a powerful question. So when I wrote my first book, obviously that was my first time really putting anything like that together. And the experience was different. And I felt like it was just more specifically about like teen dating violence and healthy relationships. Originally, we were going to re-edit the first book and just add maybe something else. And then my publisher said, there's so many parts of your life that you didn't put in. And I go, like, yeah, you're right. He goes, well, why didn't you? And I go, I don't know. I don't think I was ready. I don't think I was ready to fully say, I'm willing to put this part of me out there. So like when you read this one, I go into like the first few chapters are they sort of emulate some of the chapters in the first book, but I go into it. You know, I talk deeply about my mother in a way that I've never been able to do that. I talk about freedom writers, I talk about becoming an actor, I talk about my faith, which to me was so important, but I wanted to make sure I wrote it in a way that anyone could be like, "Oh, I totally relate." Right? I don't paint this picture that, oh, you know, God is this amazing thing. I'm like, no, I struggled with my faith. But at the end, look at, you know, here's some of the things I've learned. So I feel like I've grown so much since the first one. As you should, right? As anyone, as an artist, as you know, you think of Stephen King and he writing all of his books. I mean, this is like one chapter compared to his 800 pages sometimes book.
But what I love, and you do reveal it in both books. And when you speak, I love when you're on a stage, you talk about teen dating violence
Hmm.
and the teens that are in the audience. You know,
Right,
look at you, and they may look at the bruises they're covering up or
right.
the stories they haven't shared, and you allow them to realize you don't have to be a secret bearer, which I really appreciate, because so many people need to have an advocate like you, that young people can make different choices, and can speak up. So I really applaud that, and I'm hoping as we are continuing that the young people communicate with you in the chat room, and let you know how much your strength really is going to give them strength. So this goes to a graduate student that I met when he was at Waldorf University in Iowa, but he's from Saskatchewan, Canada. He's from the city of Regina. And he said, April, in life, we balance both the good and the bad from day to day. But April, what has been your biggest motivation in putting your energy where it matters most? And that is my dear friend Kaden.
Oh, good question, Kaden. My family, my girls, they were, especially my daughter, Summer Rose, who's obviously older, and she, I would look at her, and when we hit the height of the pandemic and we were on lockdown, I remember she became weary and she became a little scared. And I was like, oh man, I have to step up. I have to tell her that we're going to be okay, but it's also okay to feel a little worried because that's just life. But what we do with that energy. And so my daughter saw me right. My
Mm.
daughter saw every moment where I was crying, where there were times where I was just so overwhelmed. Because, you know, also with last year, my father was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So having that to deal with, and I just kept like persevering. And I wanted to show her, like, I could be a badass mom. You know, I'm not just a mom, I'm a woman. And I need you to see the woman in me, because that's how we're going to always stay connected, right? Because I never got to know the woman in my mom. I was always left out. And so like that was my force.
You know what I loved about this process is some of the really sweet videos and photographs you have released to friends and family that we get to live vicariously through the journey. And I loved when the book first arrived,
Oh,
that it was your daughter that was able to get the
she's,
mail,
yeah,
to bring it
she
in,
set the scene.
and to open it up, and there was like this great reveal. And when you think of kids, you know, opening up Christmas presents, the reveal was, my mom's an author, my mom's a book, and watching that joy and exaltation from your daughter, and now you're instilling the love of reading in your daughter, the perseverance of writing
Right,
in both your daughters. So what was that
right.
like to have your daughter hold in her hand your finished product? You know, all these teachers who are asking questions get to hold it now that it's done, but your daughter saw you getting up early, going to bed late, and now she's holding your book. What was that like?
Surreal. I don't even think I've still allowed it to sink in, even though that was a couple of months ago when it happened. I don't, I don't, I can't describe when you are looking at someone who looks almost just like you and her excitement for it, her level of ownership, she felt like she did it, you know, because she was like, Mom, our book, our dream come true. I was like, I just can't. You know, it was so wild to see her excitement, but she's just a natural optimist, which I adore and thank God, because I'm in the middle. I'm a pessimist and an optimist because, you know, my mother was a 100% pessimist. So I struggle with that. So to see a child and her sense of ownership and accomplishment and a ability to dream beyond.
Mm.
So she's like, you know, my mom is an author. Like she was talking to her friends. She was like, guys, my mom wrote a book. And I'm like, I'm in the back like crying like a hot mess.
Well, I love this next question because this next uh, amazing teacher, she's a fabulous first grade teacher and a proud Latina, but she knows about your daughter. I've been bragging about you to anyone that listens, and your sweet little daughter is following in your footsteps. So I'm going to ask the question, and I want you to tell us about your girl.
Yeah.
Her name is Alejandra Lugo. She's an amazing first grade teacher, and the kids, I think she's their first crush. You know, every little boy that has Miss Lugo, she's definitely their first crush. But she wanted to say to you, with a daughter who is now entering the same field as you,
Mhm.
this big bad world of acting, what is some advice that you've given to her? And what would be your advice for any young Latina breaking the mold in America? So tell us about your daughter and how she is breaking the mold and following in your footsteps.
Of course. So my daughter was newly cast in an animation series called Alma's Way for PBS. It was written and created by Sonia Manzana. She played Maria on Sesame Street. Okay, so she's like everybody's auntie around the world. And it is based on a little girl named Alma and her family who are Puerto Rican and they live in the Bronx. And they really were looking for someone who was authentic. And it happened out of nowhere. My daughter did a rap video about school. My friend saw it, and it was one of those things of perfect timing. Um, and she just knocked it out of the park. And so she's the voice. So we think of like Dora the Explorer. That's who that they're pushing for this new cartoon. And she loves it. She is I've never done voiceover work. So she's like, we go back and forth of bragging now. She's like, Mom, I've done like 22 episodes already. Like,
Hey,
whatever.
and you've set up a whole studio where you
Right.
live, so she gets
A
to
whole
actually do her homework and be a voiceover actress in her own home.
Right. And it's, let me tell you, it is so convenient, especially due to COVID and everything. But having the booth and hearing her, you know, I leave her, I let her do her thing. And there's just this level of confidence. And you ask me, you know, what advice? And I'm constantly telling my daughter, you don't need to be anything less but you.
Mm,
You don't need to be anything less than you. There isn't anyone else like a summer rose. It doesn't matter where you go. And understanding that you have the right to speak up and your voice matters. And I ingrain that into her because I know what it's like. I know what it's like to have my voice silenced in different ways, and it's not fun. And I know what it's like to feel as a woman to fight for my voice to be heard. And in this household, that's not the culture that we've created.
mm. You know, I love when you were in Freedom Writers. You had almost two camps. You had the young actors and actresses who had acted in their youth. You know, Giovanna was in every Nickelodeon and Disney movie we know, Hunter, yourself. And then there was a lot of folks who had never acted a day in their life. And sometimes for people who start acting really young, there's a lot of problems. So
Right.
what do you think you're going to be able to do differently for Summer for her to be this fabulous face on PBS, no less, which is
Right.
by, for, and about the people, but also still be a kid and go to school and be your humble daughter? What can you do differently that some of those Hollywood parents didn't do?
Well, number one, remain her mother.
Okay.
Remain her mother. I am, I'm here to guide and protect my daughter. That is the number one. And I'm always telling her that she is most important than anything. No dollar sign comes before my daughter. Secondly, that she's surrounded by two parents who are in the creative world. So the creativity is natural for us. And this is a blessing. And I tell her, this is a blessing that God gave, and we'll write it, but you will also have other things develop. And also, Erin, just setting her up and having, ownership of, becoming a little entrepreneur, saying, okay, you know what, you've made some money, how can we use this to grow and invest in other things, and that this is not solely, the only thing she does. That's what I think parents, they falter in, allowing this to just, that's it, and then the whole family depends on their children, and like, that's just unfair. That's unfair. If my daughter says, hey mom, I don't want to do this again, I'm like, okay, you know what, you did it. If you don't want to do that, then fine, you better do something great. I'm just saying, we're not gonna no, we're not that family. But I think there's a level of pressure that I don't need to add on to my daughter. I'm just trying to set a standard, and that's why she's excelling, because she's already witnessed what kind of standard we have for our family.
And I love when you always talk about family, because in your nuclear family, you really have this amazing partnership with your husband, who for all of you, he's a teacher. He's one of us. He's our
Yes,
brethren. So I think that's going to always keep both you and your daughter grounded,
right.
because he is so grounded.
Right, right. I completely agree. I mean, our job as parents is to pour into our children as much, but we're also gardeners, right? We're just like laying down the seeds into the soil, and we have to see which how it goes, and however she finds her way. And I'm constantly saying, like, I don't want you to follow in my footsteps, I want you to create your own. But
Mm,
then again, if she loves it, then why wouldn't I guide her?
mm. This next question is from a fabulous Freedom Rider teacher who could not wait for me to get the book and send it to her. She bought her own.
Oh,
So the book that she's going to receive from this question is she's going to pay it forward. She is an amazing teacher in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and her name is Ann Schober. And Ann asked April, I purchased your book and am halfway through it now. Your story is powerful and your resiliency is something to be admired. As young people who have lived through trauma, writing their truth can be difficult and cause issues to resurface. What advice would you give to a young person who wants to write their own story but is scared of the outcome of their words?
hmm. I think just write it. I think just writing it out, which is the most powerful scene, when you give the students, you give them the notebook and you're like, no pressure, you can write, and you know that they want to, because this is where, like, no one will judge you. And it gives me goosebumps, like, no one, if I read it to myself, yes, it's my story, but like, wow, I own my story. And I want kids to own their story before someone else owns it, right?
Mm,
Before someone else tries to say something, or diminishes their experience. I think, especially when you're writing about a traumatic, something traumatic happening to you, that's your experience. And you're the expert in your experience, and how can you communicate that, than just writing it down and looking at it. There's one thing from it coming from here and here, but really looking at it and saying it out loud, there's power in that. So
mm,
I just tell people, don't be afraid. The paper or the computer is the one thing that you don't have to be afraid of.
I love that. This next amazing educator is actually from Sao Paulo, Brazil. We've got a very international audience
Wow.
watching you and
Wow.
reading about you.
I need to get
Um,
out to Brazil.
Her name is Patricia Harano, and she wants to know about what you think is important when it comes to youth empowerment. And she said, April, how can we continue to support youth empowerment with our educational leaders? So, since you are a figure to the youth because of the film and what you write about, how do you go about not only empowering us educators, but the
Right.
youth that looks up to you?
The greatest tool that an educator has is the power to listen,
Mm,
not speak, but to listen. As an actor, my job requires me to listen. As a mother, I am required to listen to my child. And that way I know how to serve. I think kids today, I'm so excited about the youth today. And I know so many of us feel frustrated because we think that they are so far away, these millennials, but they are so in tune with what is happening in this world today that we can learn so much from them if we just be quiet and listen. That is why the scene where I say I hate white people is so effective. It's because you stop talking. You stopped talking and you began listening. And you saw like, oh wow, someone is actually listening to my pain, and you're not trying to give me a solution, and you're not trying to tell me to shut up or to be quiet or that, oh, it's going to be okay. No, you just listened. And that's all you need to do. Once you get all of that information, then you really know how to serve your community.
After watching that amazing moment unfold in the film, someone said to me very wisely that, as teachers, we are the sage on the stage.
Mm,
That moment, Hillary embodying the teacher, she became the guide on the side. And
mm.
and you embodying Maria, you became the teacher. That was a very teachable moment.
Oh, yes.
And I love that I, in watching it, uh, I became the student as well. So you taught all of us.
Right. And listen, I am fully aware that there are protocols and there are, schedules and everything that needs to be met in different school districts and for superintendents. Everybody has something to be met. But at the end of the day, we cannot forget that we are working with kids who want to be led. They really do. They really, even the kids who we consider bad or misbehave, they really just want someone to care. That's
Absolutely.
it. Like they want to know, as much as I get on your nerves, that you honestly care for me as a student.
I
Because
love
those are the ones that will come back. They will listen, they'll make you go through hell. And I see it firsthand through my husband, but I also see when he just listens.
But I think what's so powerful with you, having watched you when you speak to students,
Right,
you empower kids who might have done a bad thing, but they're not bad people.
right,
They're the ones who linger
mhm,
and wait till the very end to speak with you. And
right, right, right.
I love those last few students.
So do
I
I.
get a little piece of you who may have been stereotyped or stigma because they did do something naughty, but they want to show you this other side, and you've empowered them. And so I
Right.
think the way you empower students, let's hope that these teachers who are watching can as well.
Yeah, and I always tell teachers, like, remember that you were a student and a teenager once in your life. Don't forget that. So when I'm talking to these students, I sort of, try to become them and be in their world and speak their language. But I also I set a standard of like, yes, this is your situation, but so what? Why can't you, sit at a table and people look at you and not judge you because of how you're speaking, because you feel like you don't have any other tools? What if you show up in a suit and not with your pants all the way down? It's one of those of like, what if you actually did better?
Mm.
What's going to happen? Nothing. It's going to be amazing.
Well, this teacher is determined to get you to her community in Kentucky, and her name
Ooh,
is Kathy Connolly.
Kentucky.
And
Seven
whether it's
days.
through
I've never been.
Zoom
I've
or
been to Kansas, and that was interesting, but I've never been to Kentucky, honey.
they need you in
I need,
Kentucky.
I need to go.
And the reason they need you in Kentucky is Kathy, when I first met her, she threw out this number 27. I thought, is it from a jersey of her favorite football player? At the time, it was 27 deaths of 27 students who had died because of the opioid crisis. And
Mm,
that was years ago. And tragically, now it's in the 40s.
Wow.
And so it's a very different reality than a beautiful girl growing up in the Bronx. It's rural. It's economically depressed. And so her question is really tender. She said, April, do you have advice for a teacher like me who is trying to instill hope in the sometimes hopeless teenagers? How can a teacher change the life of a student for life, not just a semester, not just a term?
Mm, wow. Whew, got me there. uh, mm, I think there's a level of vulnerability that teachers have to cleverly find a way of doing, right? Because you still have to maintain this stature that you are the teacher. But I think, once again, what we were just saying, when you go the extra mile, when you are willing to stand in the fire with your students, when you are willing to just say, hey, tell me about me. How can I be better as your teacher? How can I be better as a human? I don't really think many teachers ask those questions because it's scary. Because kids are so honest, and bless their hearts for being honest. But I think it's really looking at them from a sense of just grace and mercy, and saying, how can I look at them differently? How can I look at their situation and help them find the good in that moment, whatever that is? And everybody's situation is different. So, and also, you can't have the Jesus complex. You cannot save them all. That's just the truth. With all the work that I've done across the United States, I've realized I'm not the savior. I come in here and I do what I can. And whoever takes it, and whoever doesn't, you have to just find a way to be okay. Because once you do have that one kid, remember that one kid impacts a whole generation of their family. So when you look at it like that, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. I don't have to save all 50 kids. If I can save a few, then I know that generations are going to be impacted.
Well, you better keep your bags packed because, as you've noticed through this call, you've got questions from teachers in London and in Brazil and in
Right.
Canada, and hopefully in our with our watch party, you'll get teachers globally. And I hope you realize that as an author and an actress, that your words transcribe and transcend geography and cities and communities and continents. So I
Wow.
really hope that you get to see the world with your book. So speaking of books, this last question is from a freedom writer, one of your biggest fans besides Maria, and that is Neurotic. Neurotic just has already bought books, so
Yeah.
he too gets to pay it forward. He even bought me a book.
I
Sweet.
know he told I wasn't supposed to tell you. I've been waiting this whole time because I'm sending you a book just because I'm going to sign it because that's what you do. But he said it to me. We've been communicating so much. And let me tell you, he has been a blessing because there were times where I needed that push, and he was like just filling me with all of this positivity. I was like, I cannot wait till you get your book. So he's been so amazing.
He's
He's
incredible.
amazing.
And for those that are watching, what's so special about Narada is in the Freedom Riders movie, his story that was in a journal that then became something that was read in class was recreated in the movie. The story about being homeless. And in that beautiful Toast for Change scene, those are his words. So he, as an author, and you, as an author, share this incredible kinship. So, Narada, wanted to ask you, from the Freedom Riders film to this amazing book, Embracing Me, do you feel a certain extra? I know you're a little extra, but do you have an extra responsibility or pressure with everything that you do because you're a role model? Because you have put it out there. So do you feel that now, that when you're out and about and people spot you, and they spot you everywhere, when you're on the subway, when you're walking down the street, you are stopped always?
Right.
Does that create a lot of extra pressure because now you're an author as well?
No, not at all. I don't think there's a pressure. I think we need more role models. I think there's a level, I think when you really understand your calling and your purpose, I don't live a crazy wild life. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, but I'm still a creative being. You know, I'm someone who still likes to take risks. And I truly believe that we need more goodness in the world. And I've never really felt this pressure. I think I think the creative side, you always want to make sure that what you're putting out, people respond to it, right? That's just like the humanity of like, will they respond? I was telling a friend that I felt like a rap artist about to drop the most intense album of my life. And so, you know, my next book, someone was asking me, I said, oh yeah, I know what I want to write about. I'm going to write about motherhood. And I just want to continue growing. I think that's the only pressure of not always having to outdo, you know, oh, you outdo your last project, but just how can I elevate and grow? That's the only pressure. And will people get it and accept it?
Mm. You know, we share so many things in common. And when I began writing my memoir, Teach with Your Heart, my dad was a character that I wanted to prominently place in my memoir as kind of the yin to my yang. And I would write, and then I'd read it to him, and he was so opinionated. We like change this and adapt that,
Right.
and then he passed away before I finished. And so it was hard for me to finish, but also do him justice. And I know with you having lost your mother, she's very alive in your book.
Hmm.
She's very present when you
Right.
speak, and she's the epitome of your beautiful daughters. So what was that like, paying homage to her but also being very honest about her?
It was terrifying because you know, my mom's presence was always very strong. But it was terrifying because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't writing her in a way that people would see her and like hate her, you know. Um, I never hated my well, I was angry at my mom. I did hate her years ago, but more I just wanted to understand her. And I wanted to get to a place that I could just release her and 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 just have people say, "Oh, I need to release as well." You know, and writing from a place of understanding. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to blame. I didn't want to sound, you know, angry. It was just saying, I get it. I get that you couldn't give me what I needed because you never received anything. So how could you give me anything? Like
And
she taught me how to fight and that was it. You know, that's my mom taught me how to fight. She taught me how to be tough, but she didn't really tell me how to love. She didn't really teach me how to forgive. She didn't really teach me these things, but she also taught me like my mom had this presence. And that's what I wanted to people for people to walk away with, that I loved her and I understood her.
you know, this is going to blow you away, but when I read books, I often draw comparisons to my favorite books. And when I think about you and the dichotomy of you and your mother, for me, it harkened back to Anne Frank and her mother. You know, Anne Frank was definitely her father's daughter. You know, Otto Frank, um, was able to carry her legacy. But when she was in that attic and lovingly writing about her dad, she was very frustrated with her mother,
Right.
but dearly loved her mother. And tragically, when they were sent to a concentration camp, the women were separated from Otto Frank. And as I was reading your story, I thought about that comparison about Anne and her mom and you and your mom. So I wanted to pay you that tribute.
Wow.
If I was teaching these two books together, that would be something I would ask students to look into, these
Mhm.
complex relationships in our lives. And it was definitely a complex relationship for you,
Right.
but you were very much your mother's daughter as well as your father's daughter.
I am a lot. It's funny that you say that because I do realize how much I am like her. I mean, I'm like we look like twins, and I can also emulate my mom's voice. When I do, it freaks me out because I go, "Oh my gosh, my mother's here. I'm sorry." You know, it's one of those. Um, I really wish that my mom and I could have been friends. I think that there was a side to my mom that other people got to explore that she never allowed, like she never showed that side to me. I think she was fun. I think she was, the talk of the town. But I didn't get to see that. So for me now, I'm that way with my daughter. Right. And I'm not saying I want to be like their best friends I do when they get older. I'm their mother first. But I want them to know me. And I want them to feel like there isn't anything I can't ask my mom.
I love that.
Yeah.
So when you sit down and say, I need a title,
Mm.
we'll
Oh,
see and are drawn to. I
right.
love your title. So where did embracing me come from?
Okay, so we've title was interesting. The first one we thought born into the flames. I was like, that's intense. What am
It's
I
like
gonna
a
be a
phoenix rising
fire?
from the
Like
ashes.
this, right? And we were laughing, but at first we were like, oh, this is it. And you know that process. You
Yeah.
go, it's such a process, everything. And I kept hearing the word embracing out of nowhere. It was a whisper, and I
It was
thought,
maybe your mother. Maybe she.
maybe it was her. Maybe it was her. I feel like it just kept happening. And so we did a poll. We tried like even stronger. And then I thought, embracing me. Wow. Wow. And then I saw that on coffee cups. And then, my mind, I saw that on as a diary, as a journal. So really that's where it came from. But the inspiration for the look of the book, by the way, my husband shot the
Mhm.
photo, right? Family business, just a plug. I was inspired by Becoming. I truly was inspired by Michelle Obama's book. I just think she's a phenomenal woman. And when I saw her cover, I thought, she's so graceful. Nothing major, just herself. And I thought, that's what the cover needs to show. Because when you fully embrace yourself, right, there's a level of acceptance. And that visual that you said of the two kids running and hugging, that's what I've done with my trauma. That's what I've done with my fear. That's what I've done with like the most shameful thing I talk about for me. I've hugged it.
Mm.
I've made friends with my shadow. And I can now sit back and say, okay, I am no longer bound by any of that.
Wow. Well, I'm going to give away a dozen books for a dozen amazing teachers.
I'm so excited about Saturday. Oh my gosh.
But there's one more book I got to give away. And
Oh,
that is when you think of a Michelle Obama, best-selling author, and April Hernandez-Castillo, best-selling author, there's a little girl somewhere
right.
in a corner who hasn't discovered their voice, who hasn't embraced thyself. And so for that last young woman, I want you to write to me so I could send you a book. What
Okay.
would your advice for that little girl to pick up a pen and to write, or pick up a keyboard and type? What do you want to encourage them to say in their seeking of the light, seeking of the truth, as you once said, using your voice as your choice? What can this young woman do to embrace me?
Wow. Live your life in color. Live your life in color, because everyone tries to make it black and white and it is not. Um, that whole coloring outside of the box, out of those lines, there's something beautiful when we decide to just, go out of that and trust yourself. Trust yourself. I think that's the hardest thing we deal with, of really trusting ourselves, trusting that I was able to say, I'm going all in. I'm going to write my whole story, and I'm going to put this book together during one of the worst times in America. And I know that everyone is telling me not to, but I'm going to trust myself, because no matter what, a pandemic doesn't stop your purpose,
Mhm.
right? Purpose is continuous. And trusting yourself is key. Really like trusting your soul and saying, I deserve better no matter what.
Mm.
And I see you, right? I think most people yearn to be seen. They just want to be seen. They want someone to know, like, wow, it gets me emotional just being seen.
Well, I love that you see us. I
Mm.
love that you see every teacher, every mom, every student, every reader. And I want them to chase their purpose like you did. I want them to be inspired by your words and to write their own. And I love that you pay it forward, transparently so. So
Mhm.
I hope that each and everyone who is watching and listening, pay it forward. Pick up a book, read these incredible words, and then embrace yourself.
Right.
Don't embrace yourself until you embrace me.
Yeah.
You, the collective you.
Right.
Um,
Right.
well,
Right.
I will follow you to the ends of the earth. As a teacher, I just want everybody to fall in love with you as I have. You had them at hello, so that was easy. But I hope they're even more in love with this other side of you, this artistic side that comes from within. And I think you got to go back to that keyboard, write a script so we can see the best of your words and the best of your acting together, because I think there's a little gold statue out there that needs to be on the same bookshelf next to your book. So that's my
Hey,
moonshot. Okay, that's
listen,
my moonshot.
this is my dream. I dream that one day Richard Legrevenes calls me and he says, "Are you ready? Because I have a script specifically for you." Because if anyone knows how to tell the story and do it the right way, it is definitely Richard. I'm just putting it
Absolutely.
out there.
Put it out there. So you learn from the best, and then you become the best.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I honor you, and I can't wait for books to fly off a shelf. Thank you so much for spending a wonderful hour with us. I hope you were inspired. I hope you want to read, and I hope you want to pay this book forward. So thank you, everyone, for spending an incredible hour with the exquisite April Hernandez-Castillo.